Welcome into ATL Day Ones with Jarvis and Tenitra. Coming up on today's show, should the Bulldogs be afraid of the Ohio State Buckeyes?
And for a mild-mannered guy who's usually unbothered 97, seemed bothered that the postseason is a no-go yet again.
These are the type of stories that happen that just make you want to smile, and that's coming up in For the Culture. It's ATL Day Ones. Let's go.
This is ATL Day Ones, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And it starts now.
I just want to start by saying thank you for making ATL Day Ones your first listen of the day. Remember, we're free and available wherever you download your podcast. Wherever you download your podcast, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Really appreciate that from you in advance. Today's episode of ATL Day Ones is brought to you by Bet Online T. Well, the Ohio State Buckeyes have made it into town. The Georgia Bulldogs will be coming in a little bit later this afternoon after they have a practice in Athens because, hey, this is a home game for him. That's just for them. Let's keep it funky right there. They are favored by a touchdown on most betting websites, but I think that the thing about a lot of things, if people are concerned about the Bulldogs, and I'm kind of on that boat, but not necessarily for all the way on that boat, but it is that the fact that Ohio State took a nice L last time we seen them come out against the Michigan Wolverines, and they may be chomping at the bit, so to speak, like the Bulldogs were against Alabama after they lost to them last year in the SEC championship. And a lot of people are thinking that there may be some momentum for Ryan Day and company to go and get this dub against the defending national champions.
But you actually, it was actually one of those things where I was like, is that a contradictory statement? Because in that statement you just said a word. People are saying that, oh, yeah, the Buckeyes, they got whipped the last time they played. The Wolverines spanked them, and they're ready just to really get back in there and maybe get a second stab at the Wolverines. Here's a thought, though. How are you going to do that when both of those teams, Michigan and Georgia, are the 1-2 offensive lines in the country? Okay.
Oh, yes.
Now, the Wolverines ended up winning the Joe Moore Award, but I wanted to just point out a couple of stats for Georgia's O-line. Only allowed 7 sacks this year. Leads the SEC, tied for second nationally. Bulldogs averaging 39.2 points per game, 207 yards per game rushing, and they're tied for third nationally with 37 rushing touchdowns and lead the country in red zone offense. The way that you do that is when your O-line wins the battle in the trenches. So if Ohio State couldn't win the battle in the trenches with what turned out to be technically the number 1 O-line because Michigan got the Joe Moore Award, the team that was really kind of 1B and ended up second place or runner-up, it's the Georgia Bulldogs. So I believe that, to me, not saying Ohio State won't be competitive, and honestly, Jarvis, it may even be closer than a touchdown win. But on the same token, I think when you get in that fourth quarter and your O-line has to be the difference versus their D-line, I give that to Georgia for starters. And I'll fall back because I know as a former defensive player, you probably are going to say the same thing I would say about my second part of my answer, but I'm going to just fall back for a second.
And to be honest with you, I think we've been doing this show for quite some time before we even started with ATL Day One, so you already know where I'm probably about to go. So here's the thing.
Yes.
Like, I want to go back to when Kirby Smart was first hired. And the first thing he said, we got to get bigger up front. And that's exactly what Kirby Smart did. He started bringing in men that made me look like I was a little person, and I'm not no little dude. And I know I just did a double negative there, but I said that for a reason. I'm 6'5", 350 pounds. So, yeah, there you go. For me to be saying something like that, looking up at dudes that they bring in on a consistent basis, like Georgia just has been massive. And I think that they followed the same formula that Nick Saban brought to the table, right? We having all these big guys, these guys that just move mountains when you see them on the offensive line. And I think that's a thing a lot of times people who believe the quote-unquote hey, revenge game or they're chomping at the bit and all that stuff. People believe that. They get fascinated with the quarterbacks and the wide receivers, right? Because, hey, let's be frank, Marvin Harrison Jr. outplays anybody lined up on the outside for the Georgia Bulldogs. And C.J. Stroud, as much as those guys were in the same room in the Heisman Trophy presentation, and Stetson Bennett and C.J. Stroud, we all know that they're outerworldly when it comes to comparison of the two, right? C.J. Stroud is much better, a much better quarterback, projects better to the NFL, in my opinion, and than Stetson Bennett. But I think that it all falls back to Kirby's main point. The main thing that he pointed out when he first stepped on campus down there in Athens is that I got to have the big boys. And I think Georgia has the clear-cut advantage. It just like you laid out statistically, on the offensive line up front. And I think that's going to be the difference in this game because the reason why Ohio State got spanked is because Michigan lined up and said, you know what, we're going to run this rock, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I think I think a lot of people get caught up in storylines when you start talking about, oh yeah, well Georgia did this last year, but no, we've made that mistake before. Even coming leading to the Tennessee game. These dudes are really, really good. So a team that doesn't match up front with Georgia, I don't believe has a chance.
I agree. And I do say that a Jalen Carter-led D-line can still keep Ohio State very, very honest. And so, like you said, you can't necessarily count on the secondary to stop Marvin Harrison Jr. Good luck with the DBs. They're going to have kind of a long day, no matter what. However, C.J. Stroud, you got to get the ball to him, right? So if Jalen Carter and company, I'm just going to call him Jalen Carter and company for the sake of brevity, but
indeed,
if they're able to get home, then Marvin Harrison, you never get to see the ball. So I just really believe that there's going to be a focus there as well on, let's put pressure on him. If we can't get home and get sacks, let's at least hurry him. Let's at least knock him to the ground and really just get him off of his rhythm. And I think the other piece there is, okay, Ohio State, you want to try to run on us? Oh, okay. Let me know how that goes. So I just think that, like you said, maybe giving a little bit too much credence and credit to a storyline doesn't mean Ohio State won't fight. But if I'm going down to it in the fourth quarter, I'm saying that I trust and choose Georgia to punch it in if they need to on the ground. And then if Ohio State gets the ball back with any time left on the clock, I believe that Georgia's defense can do what it needs to do to get them into that title game.
Absolutely. And speaking of rhythm, there's a guy. Let's talk some Hawks because Trey Young has absolutely been killing it. Like the last 4 games, the dude is averaging 32 points and 10 assists, and he's shooting 46% from deep. And we know that's the type of thing that we're used to seeing from Trey Young. And the Hawks have won 3 out of the last 4 to take on the Indiana Pacers tonight. Do you think this trend continues, T?
Yeah, and I also think that we could even be talking about the Hawks going for their 5th straight win as opposed to 4 out of 5 because they nearly got that Bulls game, right?
Right. Exactly.
So we really could be having that conversation as well, but for, a few plays that the Bulls made that maybe the Hawks didn't. But if the question really is whether or not it's a coincidence that Trey Young is trending up offensively and we're starting to see success from the Hawks in terms of the win column, I would say it's in part coincidental. I don't think it's as much about Trey's offense. Hear me out with this one, as it is about his defense. Boom. Oh, yes. The reason I say that, I know, that's why I was like, you're going to hear me out with this. Because Trey Young, we know, is not the guy who focuses on his defense, right? That's not his game. But if you start digging into the numbers, for example, I love this quote that DeJounte Murray gave about Friday's beatdown of the Pistons, right? And granted, we know Kate Cunningham wasn't there. We get all that. But hey, Hawks are down players too, so miss me with it.
Hawks are nemesis.
10 steals, however. But DeJounte Murray's DJ was most impressed, rather, by Trey chasing down a steal. The reason I say that is because when Trey hustles on defense, that takes the Hawks to a different space and place, right? Yes. Because, so for me, while I love to see the numbers, even 50% for the last 2 games from 3-point, man, it's exciting to see that he's getting back to form. But when I dig deep, people may laugh, but when I see Trey Young with 2 steals or 3 steals, or I see him with 5 or 6 rebounds, or I see the Hawks with 30 assists, That's an offensive number that does not speak to his points, but it speaks to getting the other players involved. It speaks to ball movement. It speaks to spacing. And to me, those are the key components that Trae's been actually doing more consistently in these last, I'm going to say 5 games, because even in the loss to the Bulls, he still did his job. He's been doing that piece. I think that's where it comes down to them getting these dubs.
Yeah, no doubt, man. That's you're talking about top 14 type stuff when Trey Young is deciding to give effort and play well and get in those passing lanes like his the person he was compared to when he came into the NBA, and I'm talking about Steph Curry. And we know how he was a liability coming in, and he figured it out. So I'm glad that Trey is starting to move towards that, and DeJounte Murray is pushing that and highlighting that. I think that's not a coincidence as well. So the Hawks go ahead.
And the other thing you were saying, I want to go back to the point that you made about passing lanes, because you really have to have the presence of mind and you have to have a good eye for that. We always talk about the great eye that Trae has to be able to pass, right? But in order to steal, you've got to channel or, kind of telepath where the backcourt of the other team is going to go when they're passing the ball, so that you can actually cut it off, steal it, and then give your team the opportunity to actually convert on it. So again, it goes back to, we love to see his offensive numbers, but how often do we talk about defense leading to good offense? And I do like the fact that on some level, Trae's kind of getting there and leading the way.
Absolutely. And Lord knows they're going to need all the Trae involved on defense they can get, because with Clint Capella being out tonight, that is something that we're definitely going to have to keep an eye on. And we want to definitely keep an eye on our guy, number 97, Grady Jarrett, because I'm getting a little concerned about the leader of this team, or the face of the franchise, so to speak. We'll talk about that next. But first, we got to talk about Bet Online, because it is the fastest and easiest way to come in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. I was looking, we were talking about Georgia versus Ohio State earlier. I talked about Georgia being a touchdown favorite, but guess what? The over-under is 62.5, 63 points. Woo. I don't know if I want to touch that one with a 10-foot pole, but if you're trying to figure out whether or not you want to touch it, go to Bet Online, because it continues to be the top online source for all your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They've got you covered. You guys come to us each and every day for all your ATL sports needs. How about you go to Bet Online, because they have podcasts waiting just for you, so you can make some money. So what I need you to do, head to Bet Online today, or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today, because Bet Online is where the game starts.
Now, Jarvis, we know that we were hoping for a continuation. I won't say a start, but hoping for a continuation of the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of the Falcons to just stay in the playoff hunt. But unfortunately, that dream died Saturday with the Ravens win over the Falcons. But here's the thing. It was only, 17-9? So we're not talking about some type of blowout situation. And really, Jarvis, other than one game this season, i.e. the Bengals, we really have not had a lot of conversation about blowouts with the Falcons. Right. So the defense did their job respectably, again, only giving up 17 points. But that also says, Jarvis, that we have been having that same conversation all season, because as much as the defense is bended but not broken, is as much as the Falcons have still taken L's. So that all kind of boiled over post-game Saturday when Grady Jarrett was asked the question about his thoughts on a team that's competing but is just not, no pun intended, getting home.
No, disappointed, man. You know what I'm saying? You try so hard, whatever, but different year. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You got to keep fighting, but everybody fight. You know what I'm saying? We got to win some games. We got to finish strong as we can, but to be able to not, even to have a chance to be in the postseason and, mess that up, you know what I'm saying? It's frustrating.
Frustrating indeed. And so, it begs the question of, Grady is always the guy who is amazing, Jarvis, at being able to answer a question and show some emotion. And you can kind of see what he's thinking, but he is masterful at not ever saying it. Yeah. We heard in the backside of the cut, I call it standard classic Grady Jarrett. But the front part of the response to those questions really showed the raw emotion of where he is after this point in yet another frustrating season. So my question is, we're not in Grady's head, so we want to say that up front.
Of course.
But if we had to peek in his head, Jarvis, do you feel like maybe he's kind of second guessing himself and saying, dang, I was glad to stay home and glad to be in Dean P's defensive scheme for his second year, but man, listen, it's getting exhausting. I don't know if this was the right move or that was the right move at the beginning of this year to come back.
Wow, that is a very good question. When you think about like one of the reasons why he came back, right? Because he coming into the year, I was one that kind of stood at the top of the mountain saying like, I don't know if he's necessarily a fit in Dean Pease's system, right? We kind of saw a little bit of that last season, but when you think about the type of guy that Grady is, like he probably even heard, man, I ain't gonna say he sat up and listened to our podcast. He might listen to our podcast, I don't know. But if he did hear it and say, like, man, what the hell are you talking about, dude? I'm Grady freaking Jarrett. So I'm about to make sure that Coach, I'm gonna get with Coach. I'm gonna sit down with him, like, hey, how you guys are gonna use me? And I'm gonna have these conversations before I put my name on a dotted line. And I think that Grady liked what he heard, and to the tune of, I think Grady's right now is 5.5 sacks right there on the season. So when you're talking about that type of production from an interior defensive line and not really having anybody by you that's going to attract some type of blockage, you know what I'm saying? And the meaning that you're going to get double teamed, and sometimes, you might get a squeeze a triple team in there from time to time as well. So I think that from that standpoint, from production standpoint, from an individualistic standpoint, it was the right decision. But when you start thinking about the end results of games and coming down to the wire, like, because, we've talked about them being in games as a positive thing, like you just mentioned. But as a player, being in it, being so close each and every Sunday, and then coming up with L's, that crap is frustrating. And you heard it. And he even said something towards, even on the other side of the clip we just played, was that you can kind of tell, like, he was like, I don't know how everybody else feel, but I know how I feel. And he kind of stopped himself because you felt like he was going to say something like, I don't even know if these mofos give a damn. Like, essentially, I'm going to fill in the blank. I'm going to fill in the blank there. So when you have a veteran guy pointing out these things and having it and voicing his frustration like this, you should be concerned. And meaning head coach Arthur Smith, you should be concerned. Defense coordinator Dean Pease, you should be concerned. Those are the type of things that can really get into a player's head from time to time and be like, hey, man, get this man some help, or just win some damn games. Yes.
And I want to go with what you said to start that last comment, which is get him some help. I was having an interesting conversation last night as I go through the trauma of, will I buy a new car? Won't I buy a new car? Or do I have to? One of the conversations, because, once people know what we do for a living, they start talking sports. So they wanted to know kind of where the Falcons should go. And I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not a conversation. If it's me, every pick in the draft should be defense.
What are we talking about here?
Right. So why do we have a conversation? And I said, don't get me wrong. I know there might be a hole or two at O-line, and you may have to draft an O-lineman, because as we've seen, Jarvis, this last week has been a trend of O-linemen getting re-upped by their teams, right? So there may not be those kind of top-tier free agents out there for the O-line. So you may have to try one more time with the draft. However, I really want you to just go D, because I think you made the point clear, which is get this dude some help. We saw flashes with Taquan Graham. So I told the gentleman last night, I don't want to dispute that. It's not his fault that he's injured, right? So I don't want to say we should just give up on TQ. That was giving Grady the help that you and I had hoped he would get when we said at the beginning of the season. Because I remember when you and I said, who's going to be the defensive MVP? I raised my hand and said Grady, because I truly believed that Dean was going to find a way to get him where he needed to be in his scheme. And then some of these players were going to step up. Now, that said, Jarvis, I'm going to slightly contradict myself. I think what you were saying about maybe where Grady's head could be is, bruh, you over there, you want to give me consistent help? Yeah, great that you might get it from Anderson, Abdullah, or Troy every now and again. You might get it from Ade. I'm going to just go down the whole list, Jarvis. You might get it from Rashawn. You might get it from Lorenzo. You might get it from Richie, AJ, But other than maybe AJ, did I call any name that you and I have called every week for 16 weeks? And in AJ's case, the only time we really didn't call his name was when he was out injured.
When he was out injured,
That
yes.
therein to me lies the problem. And I think Grady silently or quietly, kind of low key, made that point of, what are we doing here? Like, where, where's the effort, the consistency? Because the other question the guy asked me, and I'm interested to see what your thought was, for Grady to get that help, like, of these new players that were brought in to, quote unquote, give the defense help holistically, who would you absolutely bring back? And I was like, okay, well, Casey Edwards didn't really get a chance to kind of show all of what he was because he got injured before he kind of really got started. Or Hayward, I'm sorry, Casey Hayward got started. But other than Rashaan Evans and a few of the young guns who we still need to kind of see what they can do, like AK or when TQ gets back healthy. Come on, man. So I can understand why Grady might just be frustrated and maybe looking around saying, send help and send it consistently.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting that when Arthur Smith was kind of talking about, just from playing young guys and all that stuff, he was kind of saying, he was like, hey guys, listen, like, we have Grady Jarrett and Jake Matthews on long-term deals. Everybody else on one-year deals and all that stuff. So when people start talking about the amazing amount of money and the Falcons are going to make it rain on free agency, you know what I'm saying? Like straight Magic City style. It's going down as soon as the March hits. No, that's not the case. They're going to have to pay enough people so they can fill the roster. You know what I'm saying? Because there are going to be so many people that are going to be free agents. That money's going to have to get divvied up. And then you're talking about people, offensive linemen reading up, right? Guess what? Chris Lindstrom is going to go into his last year of his contract in 2023. So you're going to let him go into the season as headed towards free agency?
Right.
No, wrong. That's the most consistent player you have on your offensive line. So you got to take care of him. So I think that when you think about all of those guys defensively, there'll be some guys that you may potentially bring back. Casey Hayward, he's still traveling with the team, so he's locked in and focused in on helping out wherever way he can. I wouldn't mind bringing him back. As much as crap that I've given Lorenzo Carter on this podcast, I wouldn't mind bringing him back. You know what I'm saying? Like, especially if we don't know where you're going to go in the first round. If you're not trying to get a Will Anderson or somebody or Jalen Carter, if he falls to you right there. Right. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if they're going to go there. I mean, I know what they need. You mentioned what they need at the start of this segment. They need edge rushers. They need somebody who can put some pressure on the quarterback. Like, it's no secret. Like, we've been talking about this for the past 5 years. The Falcons are one of the worst teams in sacking the quarterback in the NFL. Consistently. Like, they were really bad last year, and they got really close to that this year. They improved, but still not that much. But so I get Grady Jarrett's frustration. I understand it because, there have been times where he's voiced that frustration, and you've just seen that frustration on his face, and you get tired of answering the same damn question each and every week. T, like, this is. Yeah, so I get it. I understand it. So, but for me, though, I think that the overall theme here, as these last two games wind down, they need to see who can help this man out next year. Yes. And if they can't help them out, their ass don't need to be back next year. Yeah. and then
as much as we're talking about send help to Grady and bring some pressure from the edge, boy, oh boy, if you want to hear about a guy that brought it his entire career, check out Locked On Sports Today, because I am sure that they are going to have reaction to the breaking news that future Hall of Famer J.J. Watt is wrapping it up this season. So if you want to hear more about that story and just talk about his legacy, check out Locked On Sports Today. They'll also have reaction to some of the biggest or coolest stories, like the Chargers. The Chargers are the most recent team to wrap up a postseason berth, and they said, you know what? We're not done. All right, Locked On Sports Today will tell you if they think that is the case. So just like you check us out on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you download your podcast, don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today, because they'll definitely give you also their version of For the Culture called Take of the Day. Now, Jarvis, the one thing I will say is this. I think you make an excellent point. Now that we are indeed outside of the chances that the Falcons would have a postseason berth, you have 2 games left. 2 very winnable games, by the way.
Yes.
So this is an opportunity to show us what you got, Falcons. This is an opportunity for Arthur Smith, Dave Ragone, and Dean Pease to see what is really happening and what opportunity there could be for some players to obviously or either be retained, or if they want to say, you know what, we'll move on.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of evaluation going on. So I think that a lot of people may be looking at the Troy Anderson situation like, okay, Michael Walker might not be a guy that might be around. But look at it from this standpoint. Troy Anderson is a guy that played inside linebacker. The other guy, Rashaan Evans, who's had a solid year.
Yeah.
Yes. Think about it from this standpoint. If Terry Fontenot don't want to spend no money to bring Rashaan Evans back, slide Michael Walker on the other side of the inside linebacker spot, because when he was in there, I didn't have any issues. Now, of course, he can get better, but I think there was some good things that we saw from Michael Walker early on in the year where he was looking at he was going to be like the lead, he's going to be the leading tackler for this team. So there are some good things there. I think some things there to build off of. A lot of people have been satisfied with Troy. I say a lot of people, not necessarily me. I see some things that he needs to really, really work on if he wants to be the guy that they drafted in the second round of the NFL draft. So, so there are some things there that I feel he needs to work on. So there's going to be a lot, like you said, it's going to be a lot of evaluation as this season winds down. And I think that, as it winds down, the Falcons need to really know where they're going in the early part of this draft, because this is like when you have your number 97 out here voicing and putting his frustration on display as he's talking about those particular things, you need to start to listen, because we don't want this situation to end ugly like Matt Ryan's situation ended. Yeah. Just saying.
Just as we were talking about the Chargers making a postseason berth and the Colts not so much. Anyway, moving right along.
Yes, Locked On Sports Atlanta family. You guys have been rocking with us ever since we started this thing right here on ATL Day Ones. We are up to over 5,200 subscribers. We want to appreciate you guys for doing that. And if you have not liked or subscribed to our YouTube channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you listen to us on the audio version, download whatever you get your podcast, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Leave us a 5-star review so everybody can find out about all this goodness that we have going on right here. But this is for the culture. It is the intersection between sports, entertainment, and the culture, and sometimes whatever the hell we want to talk about, because that's just how we get down on this show. Today is no different. Now, how everybody's been dealing with flight cancellations, and it's getting super, uber cold, and I'm like doubling in age, and over the temperatures and the degrees is going on. So, it's been getting pretty cold around here, and ice on the roads and all that stuff. So, I think this story is one that you can just look at and you can just smile to. So, apparently, Pittsburgh, head coach Pat Narduzzi was talking to reporters because he's down in the Sun Bowl in El Paso, and he started to tell a story about how the UTEP basketball head coach, Joe Golding, picked up some of his players from the airport whose flight had got canceled and then basically didn't have a ride to get down to where they need to get to for the bowl game. He packed all them folks, got a rental to fit his family and the players that were from Pitt, and took them to where they needed to go so they can get there for practice and down in El Paso. I just think this is probably just one of the coolest stories we've probably seen in quite some time.
It is. It really is. And there are some positive stories out there. I mean, I even heard it from my family. As painful as it is, I'm not going to cry, people. I'm not going to cry. But literally, they stayed in the airport for like a combined maybe 12, 13 hours over 2 days. And my mom was so calm after they chose not to try it again. The third time, they were like, "No, we're good. We're just going to stay in Louisiana." So I had to spend Christmas pretty much by myself. So, that was kind of sad because I was looking forward to my nephews. But the positive that I took out of it, and my mom getting a break, just kind of getting a different scenery, was the people that she spoke with, and everybody just kind of coming together to keep each other positive and keep each other encouraged and optimistic about, hey, hopefully we'll get to our destination, and them kind of sharing different stories. That is kind of the core of what Christmas is about, giving back and looking at the other man, your fellow man, and seeing how you can help them. So yeah, when I saw that story, I was like, man, as rough as it was to be without the fam for Christmas, that UTEP story and the UTEP Pitt story really gave a positive spin on it to remind me that in all of it, sometimes you just have to see the good in people to see the good, period.
Yes, absolutely. That's the thing that, you think about during these times, during the holidays, where you're just like, man, this is good. There's still good people out there. And I think that, we appreciate those people for showing the good. And we also appreciate you guys for showing up each and every day and checking out ATL Day Ones as your first listen of the day. Make sure that you give us your second listen to Locked On Sports today. They got all the national news and information. T told you about it earlier. They know they're going to be talking about J.J. Watt announcing his retirement, saying, hey, he's coming to Atlanta. So you guys want to check out, see what's going on from a national perspective, check out Locked On Sports today. But T, tell them what we got going on for tomorrow, though.
Boy, it's going to be exciting. Hopefully, I hope that we are talking about a dub for the Hawks. We got more Georgia, Ohio State previews for you. And Jarvis and I are going to dig a little deeper. We kind of hinted at this whole evaluation process for the Falcons these last couple games. We're going to get a little bit more in a deep dive tomorrow on it. So come back.
Y'all come back now, you hear?